This time on the Vital Veda podcast.
If you're using a cell phone, heavy user, a couple of hours a day, you're 3 times more likely in 10 years to get cancer. If you used a laptop on lap 3 to 4 hours, it was not only just the heat, but it was the RF signal that disrupted the mobility of the arm.
Welcome to the Vital Veda podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Smith. I'm an Ayurvedic health practitioner. I'm also a holistic health educator, and I am an electrical being, just like you. Yeah, I'm speaking to you because with me and you, every nerve impulse, every heartbeat, every organ, every cellular signal in our bodies depends on electrical gradients. So when we are in a world saturated with artificial, non-native electromagnetic signals, we must ask ourselves an important question. How do they interact with our cellular energy? How do they interact with our health and biology? And essentially, because these things are inevitable and I like to use them and they're not going anywhere, I don't want to go live in the bush completely full time. So, how do we build robustness so they don't impact our physiology and our health negatively? Can you feel EMF? Can you feel them? Because I can certainly feel them. I mean, put a laptop on your lap with the Wi Fi right on. I think you just need to be a bit present with your body and a bit self-intuitive and sensitive to yourself that you can feel your genitals being fried by a laptop on your lap. Now, the point of this podcast is not to panic. The point of this podcast is to learn to adapt. It's all about adaptability and essentially becoming in a state of awareness where you make your lifestyle, you easily create your lifestyle around EMF in a way that you don't have to worry about it or think about it. You become resilient. Of course, more and more people are becoming hypersensitive to EMF because the power densities are becoming thicker, they're stronger, and there's more and more transmission signals popping up all over the place, which means there's more devices, more towers popping up. So we really got to increase this adaptability. And I'm grateful for our guest to join us on the show. His name is Daniel Debon. He's a telecommunications engineer with over 30 years of experience. He's now a leading expert in the mechanics of EMF, including its impact on biology. His background is interesting because he used to work in standards. He used to set standards for large telecommunications industry. He's worked inside the infrastructure that powers modern wireless technology, including overseeing how electromagnetic fields interfere with each other inside testing labs. But over time, his concern shifted towards bringing in a factor into the field of telecommunications and wireless devices that was not there, and that is the interaction between these devices and human biology, the biological effects of long-term exposure to EMF or electromagnetic radiation. This is from everyday devices, laptops, tablets, mobile phones, Wi-Fi routers, microwave oven in your house. He then went on to found DefenderShield, which is probably what I've come across as the best shielding products available, which are designed to reduce EMF exposure from personal electronics. He's also a co-author of the book Radiation Nation, The Fallout of Modern Technology, which talks about EMF awareness and protective strategies. Today, he speaks a lot about EMF. You can find him on so many podcasts. He's an author. He's an engineer who speaks about it from an engineer point of view, who understands how these systems are built and tested. So we get a little geeky in going to geeky, but simplifying, really getting to understand what actually are the different frequencies, what are the watts and the gigahertz, and what does this all mean in a very fundamental, like childhood level, and then the mechanics of how it actually interacts with human biology, followed by how we can simply rectify it and essentially go beyond it, become greater than that, develop a frequency as well as common sense distance from these devices, but still utilizing these devices in our everyday life to enjoy them, but not get affected by them. So I'm so excited for you to join this podcast. If you enjoy what you're hearing, share it with others. This is really important to share with others, especially those who are putting AirPods or AirPods in their ear, or Bluetooth wearables, or sitting with a laptop on their lap without protection, or putting a mobile phone next to their brain without protection. And we'll get into how to protect and do these sources. So enjoy the episode. Much love. Welcome, Daniel, to the Vital Veda podcast. I'm so excited for you to be on because it's been a while since we've done an episode on EMF, electromagnetic fields, and particularly we're going to be looking at non-native electromagnetic fields, as we have also done episodes on geomagnetic fields, I think, and the Earth's magnetic field and how we can utilize that to support us. But today we're going to speak about what one of the most pernicious toxins today, which is not getting enough acknowledgement from the general society because it is either invincible to the eye or you don't feel it unless you're hypersensitive. So this is super important. It's really a factor in healing any disease, any health. I want to just introduce you, or allow you to introduce yourself. But what I find fascinating about you is you were in the telecommunications industry as a
Yeah.
regulator, and you kind of saw you never learnt about the correlation between telecommunications and health, and that brought you, one of the reasons it brought you to the field of shielding from EMF. But when you were in the telecommunications industry, what were you regulating?
So thank you for inviting me, Dylan. I'm excited to chat with you today because I'm passionate about the subject as you are.
Thanks.
And years ago, I was in the telecommunications business, as you said, and I literally defined the standards. My organization defined the standards that the entire US network was built upon. And then I would look at all the technologies that meet those standards to make sure that they could be installed into these networks that we have in the US. So I was very involved in what it is that needs to be provided in service and how you get there with technology. So I had a lot of experience in this space. And as you were pointing out, by the way, I was worried about what the electronics would do to other electronics, not what is electronics doing to a person. And that was not unusual. My counterparts, my peers, were the same way. It wasn't like we were trying to avoid anything. We just concentrated on the engineering of the problem and came up with the answers to the problem. So, ironically, I never had once a conversation about health with anyone, not
Mm-hmm.
at all. And all the times I was in that industry, and there were and lies actually sort of somewhat where the problem lies. The silos of understanding, the medical community and the technical telecommunications community, they were not talking to each other, and so there was a lot of stuff going on that was important to know about the impact to humans. Yet those who were sort of developing the standards for that didn't have a clue
Awesome.
because we didn't communicate.
I'm so excited towards the end of this episode to talk about where we are at now with the standards, because we have interesting government now in US taking more action towards acknowledging EMF and perhaps implementing it in government standards.
Right, yeah. But I'm a skeptic still because it's you have a lobbying industry that's huge,
Mhm.
and changes in standards uh, move slowly. And I definitely want to talk about it because if you understand what the standard is and where the gaps may be, you can better define how you would like to deal with it in your own personal life. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
I have a appreciation for understanding it like that. So
Before we get into it, I want to just unpack for the audience what exactly is EMF, and to kind of precursor, or to before we go into that, I personally think non-native electromagnetic fields is the new cigarettes. And people think, oh, that's crazy. But when cigarettes were a few decades ago, people didn't think they were bad. We will in 10 years, I have without a doubt that in 10 years, we will be saying, what? You used to put a phone next to your ear, like right next to it?
right,
And
exactly.
the cumulative effect is incredible. So people think, come on, like that sounds radical. But let's just unpack what actually is EMF. We know what a microwave oven is. That's kind of one factor that people kind of get. We know X-rays was now we know X-rays. You can't just do them so frequently because they are not good for you. So that's like, I want to go into radio frequencies, ionizing versus non-ionizing radiation. Just give a picture of about the EMFs that we are exposed to regularly: mobile phones, laptops, even microwave ovens in the house, Wi-Fi routers. just a brief, if we can keep it concise, overview.
Yeah, hard to be brief about the context of the scope of what you're suggesting, but let's start. So, emissions, electromagnetic radiation emissions, have been around for a very long time. AM radio, FM radio that evolved, all of these things are emissions that are being transmitted into the air, and they're going a distance, and they're being listened to, or you're doing something with the information you're getting from the far end. So it's been around a long time. And then if you think about cell phones, maybe even 20 years ago, when you picked up your cell phone and you called your friend couldn't afford a cell phone. So we really weren't using it very much. And so we wouldn't put it on our head for 2 hours. We'd put it on our head for 2 minutes. It's just the nature of the use. And when the standards were created in the U.S. for the signal of a cell phone, which also comes similarly with a Wi-Fi router and with a laptop, a tablet, all these things emit a transmission that goes somewhere else. What's different now than 20 years ago? We put it against our head. We put it into our pocket. We put it into our back pocket. And all of a sudden, we have all these technologies that are really touching our bodies. Is it a problem? Well, in the case of the US, for example, the standards were over 30 years ago we developed it, and I think in Australia as well. And the standards for us, which I think is also true for Australia, was based on 6-foot males, people who have thick skulls, mature skulls, and a lot of stuff before it goes to the brain. Our standard allowed a signal to go 1 to 2 inches and heat up that area by 2 degrees. 2 degrees. Why is it 2 degrees? Well, it's a microwave oven signal. A microwave is 2.3 gigahertz, and a cell phone is around 1 gigahertz, generally speaking today. Not true with 5G, but and so you have a microwave that you put on your head, and if you're a 6-foot male, maybe it heats up 2 degrees. If you're a child, 6 years old, it goes completely through their head. So the whole use of the standard was 6-foot males over 30 years ago. Dylan, it represents about 3% of the population using cell phones today. Only about 3%. So what happens to the other 98%? Does it enter in 2 degrees? Are we worried about the thermal impact of a signal? Or are we worried about the biological impact? And
I think it's kind of like putting in a microwave oven like a nice watery soup, or like a really dense, I don't know, sweet potato compared to the adult is the sweet potato and the baby is the soup.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, it was the water that's between the cells heat up
Right.
when you put your microwave on. It heats up and oscillates the cells, and that voila, it's cooked. But interestingly enough, it seems through all the scientific evidence that I've seen over the last 5-10 years, it's all biological impacts, and the biological impacts are far more vast and more debilitating potentially even than a cancer could be that you may have heard associated with it. And so people need to understand that there may be things they want to do to sort of mitigate those high levels of exposure, because in some cases we know a lot about those exposures over time and what the impact of the human body can be.
Let's go into that, the mechanics of how they interact, the biology, because as you said that you just mentioned studies, and some people might say, oh, there's no evidence to show
Yeah.
Let's go into how it
Actually,
actually affects.
you asked me a question before about what does the spectrum look like? Ionized radiation. What is ionized radiation? It is radiation that's powerful enough to take an electron, knock it out of its orbit, and charge that. Therefore, they call it ionized. And that is well known for impacting the human cell and can be easily cancerous. And that's X rays, that's gamma rays, that's stuff that's really at the higher end of the spectrum. And so I think you're right. Some people think, well, if it's not ionized radiation, then it's not going to bother you. Well, actually, the mechanics are different. Electrons are not knocked out of your orbit, but rather the cell itself fatigues. And there's some things that happen as a result of that fatigue. And if you think about calcium, calcium can penetrate the cell, and then there's chemical composition changes that happen within the cell. And that's how you can mutate or DNA damage that cell. So it's a different mechanic that actually works. It's slower, the power levels are less, but nevertheless, over time, it does potentially accumulate for the human body.
Right. So the excess of calcium is entering the cell because the cell is becoming vulnerable and permeable. Is that right? And we get the
Yeah, it
increase.
actually literally goes through the membrane of the cell. And when it gets through, that calcium, as a result of the weakening of the cell, it becomes stronger. Now, Dylan, that's one line of science that we know well, and it's very well established that is a mechanism of breakdown. But it's also true that I think you actually pointed out there's stress. There's actually a stress, and some people think about it as oxidative stress.
Right.
An oxidative stress is just an imbalance of free radicals and antioxidants, right? And so net result is a, um, a oxygen imbalance that occurs. It's far more complicated than that. If you look at some more of the recent science that talks about the stressors, and the stressors, as you pointed out at the starting point, was associated with a lot of other toxins that can be dangerous to the human body. So when you talk about electromagnetic radiation, um, at the same time, you can talk about multiple chemical sensitivity and the impacts of chemical chemicals in the air that impact the human body. You can talk about a hammer hitting your arm as an external stressor. Your body is reacting. When you hit your arm with a hammer, you know it. But when you hit your arm with electromagnetic radiation, you don't feel it. And so that's sort of a big difference. But when you get hit with a stressor, whether it be chemical or electromagnetic, the body reacts. It's like if you and I were in the woods and we saw a bear, what would we do? We'd instantly run to protect ourselves. We don't even think about it. That's an automatic response of the human body. Well, that happens to the cell when you talk about a RF signal hitting
Right.
your human body. It automatically says, you know what, to the cell next to it, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm hurting. And you go into a phase of um, hurt that won't recover until you take it away. So when you have heavy users of cell phones, that's what happens, right? They don't get better over time. If you're using a cell phone heavy user a couple of hours a day, you're 3 times more likely in 10 years to get cancer of the frontal lobe. That's because the stressors are hitting you, and it's so good. But if you use it for a couple of minutes a day, you likely will never need to be concerned about the impact of that stressor because the energy simply doesn't have enough time to get more aggressive with the human body.
Right, right. So just to summarize, basically they're kind of knocking at the door of the cell, opening up through these voltage gated calcium channels, which
Right,
allows excess calcium, which is important but not in excess, which creates the reactive oxygen species and creates the oxidative stress,
right,
which damages the cells, damages the DNA,
right,
reduces the energy. You spoke about this like dead kind of or low energy cell, like fatigued cell, which really correlates, I guess, with the brain fog that people are experiencing, or just the lack of lust for life, the lack of zest for life, that low energy that people
right.
have. And this, I think, is, and we see, I've heard these, what I've researched, these voltage gating calcium channels are particularly concentrated in three parts of the body: the brain, the heart, and the genitals.
And
So,
you know why, right? Soft tissue. You're
right.
exactly right.
More water, more
Yeah,
water.
yeah,
So this is why when people are, first of all, putting a phone next to their ear, or putting the woman, they're tucking the phone in the breast, like the bra when they
right.
exercising, or even just a phone in the front pocket. I'm just like, oh my God, this is a recipe for disaster.
So that's a great summary, and I appreciate that because now we're going to change the subject. Am I worried about oxidative stress or cancer, which is typically the result of calcium channel, right? It turns out that electromagnetic radiation hypersensitivity is something that's fairly modern. Why? Because we didn't have electronics around us. And when 10, 15 years ago, roughly speaking, 20% of the population was electric hypersensitive, of which 80% were women. And what does that mean? Well, there's neurological impacts. Your eyes can hurt, your ears can ring, you're getting headaches, you have fatigue, you have nausea, you have anxiety, allergy like symptoms. There's a whole host of impacts that occur. And when you go to a doctor and you have a headache, they'll say take 2 aspirin. Your headache, however, could be because you're too close to a router. It's because of an RF signal that's constantly loading your body. Currently, I've actually seen studies recently that show that it's gone from 20 to 50%. So,
Mm.
and I don't know if that's, I'm reluctant to characterize it as a 50% problem, but I've seen now evidence that suggests
Mm.
it can be 50%. So to me, it seems like the density of the signals that are around us could be actually increasing body response
Right.
than not even realizing it.
It's interesting for me to hear those figures. I mean, me as a practitioner who sees patients, I wouldn't even say 20%. Or maybe I haven't gone into it in depth enough, but I haven't seen that many hypersensitive patients. But I guess it's a spectrum, right? I did have
Yeah,
one patient who could not go on an airplane because of the EMF,
yeah,
and she could not
yeah,
go into certain environments. If she went on the airplane, she would have headaches and anxiety, and just her
yeah,
whole body would tense up. She couldn't do it. It
right,
was too much for her. But it's
right,
definitely a thing. I think for me, if I put a phone next to my ear, like I will do it so occasionally. I don't have my earphones, my ear tubes, which I'm wearing now, or I can't use the loudspeaker because maybe I'm out in an environment and I had to
right.
take this phone call. I can feel it even
Yes,
straight away. And if I put a laptop on my lap, not that I do, like, I mean, anyone listening right now, just put a laptop on your lap and just maybe just close your eyes. How can you got to feel it. I think
right.
majority, as you said, beyond 50% can just feel that.
Yeah, no question, and it's very real. You refer to a clinician. There was a clinician that deals with liquor hypersensitivity. He's an expert in the U.S. on it, and he actually had a patient come into his clinic that was in a wheelchair. It turned out he was working as an electrician in a heavily dense power location, and that electrohypersensitivity that he had was so debilitating, it put him in a wheelchair.
Mm.
And so, as you pointed out, there are extremes. Maybe you get a headache. Maybe you get tingling a little bit in your fingers when you're typing on a keyboard.
Yes,
But it's
definitely.
also true it can be more extreme, and it can have more serious damage that's happening. And in those cases, it takes a very long time to help that patient recover, because as you know, you have to balance
Right.
those things that are out of balance. Obviously, you're not recovering from exposures. That's nutrition. There's a lot of
Mm.
other things. Do, do, do you have a microbiome that is where it should be? For example, we've found that in some of the clinics we work with, they've found higher levels of DevC microbiome,
Mm.
and that actually can be pretty toxic to the human body. But there was elevations that were out of the normal range, and they were also electrohypersensitive. So we consider that a not a coincidence, but a correlation.
Mm. You mentioned frontal lobe cancer of the brain caused by EMF. What are the figures that, or the minutes a day that people need to be wary of, or kind of keep as a boundary limit?
Right. Well, again, when you don't use it a lot, less than an hour or so a day, close to the body, you're probably going to be pretty okay. But I'm going to answer your question from a scientific point of view. The cell phone transmit levels in the US are 1.6 watts per kilogram. That's in that area, you can produce a signal 1.6 watts. A microwave is 1,000 watts, to give you a contrasting view. But the standard allows 1.6 watts. And a RF signal debilitates the blood-brain barrier. We have a lot of science that shows that it reduces the efficacy of the protection to the frontal lobe. And so we have that action occurring. So it's maybe not taking quite as much as you may think to get to the frontal lobe. In this case, you can have 0.1 watts, which is about 15 times less the power level, that can mutate a cell in the frontal lobe.
Wow.
So when I hear people putting things in their ears, I get concerned because there's a constant load. And in some cases, there's transmissions directly through the body and through their head. And you know, I don't necessarily think it's a great idea to find that convenient and also take the risk of the potential damage. And what we know from research, that there's been a 2% frontal lobe growth of cancer in over the last 10 years, compounded 2% per year. So we know it's hard to say that's because of your cell phone, but it's also true you can't ignore it because it's associated with the growth of the use
Right.
of the technology around us.
And it's one of the toxins that is affecting
Right.
the
It's
brain.
one of the toxins. Could be many more.
And if it's weakening your blood-brain barrier, then it could be that in combination with the glyphosate that you're breathing in, or
Right.
if you're working on a building site, all
Right. Oh,
these
it's even
things can
worse, right?
affect. Right.
I also want to talk about the gut a tiny bit. I have a friend of mine who is an expert on microbiome. And I remember him telling me that you have 10 times more bugs in your stomach than you do cells of your body.
Right.
And that you muck around with that, there's concern. Well, it turns out RF signals, like a cell phone or microwave, the bugs like that. And they actually propagate at accelerated rates under those exposures, which, as you know, can disrupt a lot of stuff, including your immune and and other aspects of the control of the relationships between the microbiome and the brain also contemplated. So, in contrast, by the way, because I'm often asked about 5G, I'm going to, a cell phone works about 1 gigahertz. That's 1 billion cycles per second.
One billion cycles of what? Of the transmission?
So let's talk about that. What is a hertz? A hertz is 1 cycle per second. And so if I put my finger here and in 1 second a wave goes by, that's 1 cycle
Okay.
in 1 second.
And that's a
When
wave
I
of
say
radiation?
a
It's a
wave
of
of
transmission.
radiation,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Think of it like the water on an ocean.
Yeah.
The waves going by a point, and how many waves go by at that 1 point over a second. Now, you have 1 billion cycles per second in a gigahertz. And so that has a different impact to the human body than 1 hertz. 1 hertz, by the way, is typically the Earth is up to 15 hertz DC. So it's really low. The body's sort of used to it. At 1 gigahertz, it's sort of trying to get used to it. Not quite there yet. But at 5G, there's been studies that I've seen at 20 gigahertz, 20 billion cycles per second. And guess what? Bugs like that even more.
And this is the bad bugs. This is the non-beneficial bacteria.
The bad bugs, right? Exactly, right. And so
it reminds me of cancer, the relationship between cancer cells and chemotherapy. It's like a poison which can kind of knock at their door and irritate them and shake them up, and that's when they kind of fight back with more proliferation and metastasis.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the case. And that's science. It's not our guess about this stuff. It's simple science.
I mean, there's also science to show that how EMF does affect the cancer cells, because it's again irritating the water of the cell, the cytoplasm, the gel.
Yeah.
It's making that more dead, which causes, as you said, these dead cells. When cells get dead or they get low energy or low, what we call prana in Ayurveda, like life force, they have low life force. They're very dull. That's when they start to clump together and form a tumor. So we want cells that are full of energy, full of life force, prana.
And that's a wonderful observation. Here's another. When you muck around with your gut, that's what mitochondrial repair covers. And you become weakened in those spaces, which allows your body to build up its strength, particularly at night when you go to bed. You rebuild that. So if you're not keenly aware of that sort of potential impact of having the sanctuary in your bedroom, you disrupt the recovery into the following day as a result of that. And that's very important, in my opinion, to be careful about.
Absolutely. Recovery. We have to, with all the toxins that we're being exposed to. They're not going to go away. So we need to maximize that. And we're going to get into the action steps and see that sleep is key. Before that, you mentioned 5G. So about 6 to 7 years ago, maybe, I don't know, was it COVID or before COVID? 5G was this big thing which everyone was trying to protest about. And we saw, even now on the Wi-Fi routers that we connect to, you got your regular 2.4 gigahertz. So you mentioned 1 gigahertz being a cell phone. 2.4 gigahertz was the kind of standard 3G, 4G. And then we have at least in Australia, we also have if I buy a Wi-Fi router, I will have the option to connect it to 2.4 gigahertz or 5G. Now, I'm also heard that 5G is not actually the 5G. Like, I don't think it's a 20 gigahertz 5G. Right.
Yeah. Remember, it's like you have 2.4 gigahertz, meaning you have a wave going past something in 1 second, and it's 2.4 that go past billion cycles, right? When you say 5G, it's actually not 5G technology being applied, but a frequency rate of
So it's 5
5
gigahertz.
billion, 5 billion. Yeah, right. 5 billion cycles per
Right.
second. And people get
Haha,
confused about that,
right.
right?
That's like deceiving. I think they're trying to think, oh, you're getting 5G, the high new technology with your
No,
Wi-Fi
no.
router. But okay, that makes sense. So, like, is what I mean, we've seen 5G towers, but how active actually is it? Is it actually implemented? What's going on?
Yeah, let's be, there's a lot of people that can get concerned. Um, there is concern, legitimate concern, because we really don't know in science what the implications are because we really haven't studied it. So it's not, it may be very safe, it may be very dangerous. We really don't have evidence, strong evidence yet about it. But given I said that, when you have a cell phone, I mentioned 1.6 watts per kilogram, right? That's a power level. It's about this high. Well, when you have a cell tower, it's maybe 20 watts. So when you're really close to a tower, the energy levels are much higher than what you have from a cell phone. When you start looking at 20 gigahertz, which is a 5G uh, speed, is sort of where you're starting to part from where we know there's a lot of science. 1.6, a lot of 5G stuff being deployed today is less than 10 gigahertz. So we know a lot about it, right? But when you get up above 10 gigahertz, in the 20 space, for example, do you know it takes 40 watts from that tower to go 750 feet? So the distance of these higher rates are much shorter. And so the power levels are higher to get there.
Mhm.
And that's really where there may be real concern. We're introducing levels of power that didn't exist in our local environment. And will that have any effect on humans, men, women, children? I think it may.
Mm.
And certainly, if you look at the evidence of which we now know about up to 10 gigahertz, it's probably likely there could be
Mm.
potential concerns.
So it's like the 5G is doing this incredibly heavy lifting. It's got so
Right.
much gigahertz to give, but that's why I can't push too far. And the
Right.
good news about that is it's easier to distance from that,
Right.
if you can.
Yeah,
Um,
or don't get the service
right.
until we know more about it.
But if you wanted to, distance yourself, if there's 5G towers or something nearby and you can move away from it or stay away, at least you only have to travel 750 feet
Right.
rather than,
Right. You don't have to go far. That's
right,
right.
right.
And that's sort of the concern is not just the increased frequency rates,
Yeah.
but it's also the power levels to take.
Wow. Incredible. I mean, when I see 5G towers, or what I think is 5G towers on top of apartment buildings,
Yep.
I'm just like, come on, like you just do a study on that top floor of the apartment, and definitely you will see disease. And I've heard
Yeah.
recounts of people.
And I think that's an important correlation. It turns out there's likely 20 watts being produced on those, even though they may not be, it's likely true they're below 10 gigahertz. But the power is high in its in
Right.
their environment, and that's what hasn't been in their environment in the past.
When I first started studying the science about non native electromagnetic fields in depth, I ran to my Ayurvedic teacher in India with such enthusiasm and almost like revelation like, this is such an important toxin that is creating so much significance in disease. And kind of, I had all this excitement and like I just discovered the number one pernicious toxin in the world, which I still truly believe is highly impactful. But his response was kind of, he just brushed me off and he just said, Abhyanga. Abhyanga is self oil massage. And that was his solution to EMF. it's about giving yourself an oil massage every day, because when you do that, it nourishes the fat tissue, it stabilizes your nervous system, and it strengthens what Ayurveda calls kavach, which means your protective armor. It's a field of armor on your biology, because we are electrical beings. So when you have healthy cell membranes and well-nourished tissues, especially the sebum, the fat tissue in the skin and below the skin, that regulates how signals move through your body. You can download our free Abhyanga guide, free guide poster, which teaches you. It's in the show notes, the link. And you can also listen to a guide where you don't have to look at a poster. You just close your eyes, listen, and practice this self-oil massage. And that's on Insight Timer, under my profile on Insight Timer, Dylan Smith. We cover everything from medicated oils to simple kitchen oils you can use to begin your self-oil massage today. If you also want to go deeper into Abhyanga, you can listen to a podcast episode that I did on that, on the Vital Veda podcast episode on Abhyanga. So will you just explain watts? We get the gigahertz. You've explained that. Then the watts is the power coming from that to generate this microwave signal. But how do you
So
measure the watts? Or what can we
so
compare it to?
think of it as a hose. You have a
Mm.
hose, and it can go 10 feet, let's say, 10 yards, whatever it is. But you really wanted to go 50 yards. What do you have to do? You got to put more power into it, more pressure into it to get it farther. That's the same problem with the microwave signals, by the way. How do you get it farther? You have to put more power into it. You got to build more energy into it so it gets farther out.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where it lies, the potentials for, because your children can be in the front yard with a transmitter at 20 watts that's never been there, and it's only in the first 10 to 20 feet it's been from the tower, the small cell site they call it. And I'm concerned about those kinds of exposures long term for kids, because we just don't know about it. And you would, as an engineer, predict that potentially can be problems, but we just haven't documented those problems.
That watts is not a microwave signal. That's just a different type of...
Actually, that's a good point. I'm glad you said microwave. I mentioned you get 1,000-watt microwave ovens.
Mm-hmm.
That allows you to cook it really
Right.
fast. If it was like 1 watt or 1.6 watts, it'd take you all day to cook it.
Mm.
So they jack it up, the power that's being transmitted into the meat, and that's how they cook it, because they put more power into it.
Mm. But the frequencies that are coming from the watt energy, rather than the actual magnetic field that it's producing,
It's
not RF, right?
the microwave is 2.3 gigahertz.
Right.
And your Wi-Fi, as you know, is 2.4 gigahertz.
Mm-hmm.
They're the almost identical frequency rate.
Yep.
The difference is the power level that's
Yes.
being
Okay.
transmitted at.
Right. So what is a natural power level for people to be exposed to? Do we have any reference point or any kind of power level in nature?
No. We have. I'm going to answer that in a moment. I want to talk about. We've talked about RF signals. We've talked about microwave signals. We haven't talked about blue light. Light is on an EMF spectrum, electromagnetic radiation spectrum. It's in between the microwave and the ionized radiation X-ray. And it is electromagnetic radiation. What prompted me to think about this was the question you asked me, what's in natural? Well, light is natural, and it's electromagnetic radiation. What's the difference? Well, the energy level is different. Mm-hmm. The power is more.
Interesting.
From our device. When you're looking at a screen, you're actually more energy that's in the blue spectrum, and there's the right and the red and everything else spectrum that's in part of that view. But the blue is at the high end of the spectrum, which has more power, and that influences the macula, a bunch of other things, and we'll talk about that if you'd like. But that's natural in the earth and sun, but it's not at the power levels that are being used delivering from your screens.
Right.
And that is a big deal. And I know we're going to talk about this, but when the blue light component is the part that influences the cryptochrome protein in the back of the eye. And so when it's sunlight, the cryptochrome says, hey, I see lights up, so I don't have to turn them off. And then the sun goes down and turns off. Then what happens? Well,
Melatonin.
natural body stuff goes on where you start generating melatonin in the human body and other functions that occur. So you're impeding the natural process when you're looking at a monitor an hour before you go to bed. And so your whole circadian rhythm is being disrupted as a result of you not maybe going to sleep quickly enough. It's all because of the blue light, which is damaging to the macula of the eye.
Yes. It's, when you talk about the macular degeneration and the optic nerve and these things, in Ayurveda, we kind of simplify these frequencies into various things. One of the things is that it kind of dries up the system. It dries up the cell. As I said, it makes that cell fatigue. It takes the prana, the life force, out of the water component,
right,
the cytoplasm.
Yeah.
And of course, the number one, macular degeneration is a big epidemic. I actually treat it a lot in my clinic. And one of the main reasons is dryness. There's so many factors that can dry it out. But literally, a blue light and these EMF coming from the screens can dry out your eyes.
Yeah, but you know what's also at play? You don't blink as much.
Right. Wow.
You're not blinking, so you have dry eye as a result of not blinking because you're looking at the monitor, which is, of course, another complication of the eye.
So comparing, say, the sun or the full moon to a computer screen, they both have the same amount of Kelvin, which is the light temperature, which may be about, say, 6,500 Kelvin or 7,000 Kelvin, as opposed to like a red light. But the power density, you're saying, from a device is more compared to even the sun?
Closer.
It's closer. Okay.
Yeah.
Even though the sun's, of course, an incredible powerhouse, you're still not getting that amount of... Do you measure it in watts? Like, is that watts coming from through the blue light through the device or through the sun? Is that a watts measurement?
No, it's the intensity of wattage from the monitor screen. It's measured in power. And that's levels that are typically higher produced to present the image than the power that you have from the sun.
And interesting how you said blue light is in between microwave radiation and ionizing, which to me, if it's more towards ionizing, that's even more powerful than microwave radiation. Would that be right?
It could be. There's no evidence that that's true. But because you just brought that up, I'm going to bring something else up. You're talking about terahertz, trillion cycles per second, when you talk about non-ionized radiation, right? Well, an X-ray.
Ionizing, you mean?
Ionizing, right. Yeah. And when you get to 6G, it's up to 2 terahertz.
Wow. Jeez.
So you're actually starting to go into the ionized space.
Right. Wow.
And so it's interesting.
And just for those who don't, I'll tell a story. I met a friend who works in growing medical cannabis, and he does it all through government regulation in Australia. So he has to put once they've grown the cannabis, they put it into the like a cage, like a room, and close the door, and they blast it with ionizing radiation, and they can't be in that room. So they're like pulverizing this plant and losing all the prana. So, and people know, like sometimes the x-rays, you have to go out of the room, that the sonographer has to leave. That's the ionizing. It's so powerful. So when they're doing
I tell the story, you went to a dentist and they put a piece of lead plate on top of you. You don't know it's a lead plate. and they run out of the room and then they push the button. There's a real reason they don't stay in that room
Right.
because of the exposures.
I have a question which is probably on many people's mind. What do you think about these new Rapiscan airport scanners? The ones where you kind of stand and lift your arms out to the side and
Oh,
your legs to the side?
well, they were far more dangerous 10 years ago.
Right.
They're actually using RF to do that at lower power levels. And they're not quite instantaneous, but they're short intervals. They probably tend to be more relatively safer than what's been used in the past and not that dangerous. But
Right.
I know, like, when I can avoid it, I do. I don't
Right.
want that accumulative impact.
I've done a bit of research and it shows that they're lower exposure than holding a mobile phone to your head. And it does always the staff, my wife, she always says, pat me down. I'm all right. I just go. I can't be bothered. But,
Right.
yeah, but, they always, whenever my wife's like, they're like, what? Like, it's very, very low because they must get it a lot. It's a bit of a trend as well on kind of Instagram. People are showing how they're getting pat down. I think it's a good thing. It's good awareness,
I
but
do too. I agree with that.
I don't think they're that bad. But they, as you said, they're
They're not. They
non-ionizing
used
and
to be pretty
right,
serious. Not only that, but when you talk about these kinds of things that are constantly in use, it should be calibrated every year.
right.
And there was no evidence of consistent calibration of that technology. So where you thought the power levels were one thing based on the standard, they were maybe 10 times that because they weren't calibrated.
Mhm.
That
Yes.
was chronic
Right, right,
problems
right.
in the past histories of
And
technology.
and what's interesting, so when you were regulating the industry, you had nothing to do with health. It was just regulations of interacting with
Right.
other devices.
Yeah.
Is that
What happened was, um, I was in the stands for so long, and then my sons, who were adult men at the time, had their laptops on their lap, and my wife says, "I want grandchildren. Get them off your lap." She's in social work. She had nothing to do with technology, and I said, "No, the power levels are too low. Why would you worry about it?" And so I looked, and this is close to 20 years ago. I looked, and even back then, we knew that if you used a laptop on lap 3 to 4 hours, it was not only just the heat, but it was the RF signal that disrupted the mobility of the sperm. And and as you pointed out before, it's like, why didn't I know that? Science wasn't bridging to technology, and I never knew that. Just like smoking had a
mhm,
lot of research 50 years ago that said there's a direct correlation link between cancer and smoking. But I smoked cigarettes because I thought I was a big man. I had no idea I was killing myself when I did
right.
it.
Exactly. And as I said, the voltage-gated calcium channels are concentrated in the genital area, and
Right,
there is an absolute epidemic of infertility in men and
right.
sperm loss, loss of motility and count. And without a doubt, there's many factors, but I don't think without a doubt, I would say the main reason, or at least one of the main reasons for that, is having a phone in your pocket more so,
Yep.
and also laptop on lap, but people have phone in their pockets more.
Yeah, interesting you brought that up, Dylan. I wrote a book on this subject, like Radiation Nation. It was a book that at that time it was written was a little over 5 years ago. Talked about what it is, um, what science knows about it, and what you can do about it. I tried to give that description
Mm,
because it, people didn't fully understand, and we did know a lot. It's just that people weren't learning a lot. Well, I had a fellow, a Dr. Prasad, look at what I wrote, and he's a bio, um, biochemical expert of the highest order, a brilliant man. And he said, "Dan, I read your book, and you said that a 12-year-old girl can put a cell phone in her back pocket and there can be DNA damaged or mutated cells as a result of that." I had seen science that suggested those kinds of direct links, and I wanted to make sure I sort of mentioned it, so if it would really be true, at least you'd be aware of it. He said, Dan, I don't really think that's true. I said, okay, I appreciate your view. A couple of years later, he calls me up and he said, I had a woman come into my office and she had two forms of cancer in a stillborn child. If you had one of those cancers, the probability was close to zero you would have it. Having two was a technical impossibility. And he said, Dan, you may be right, that we're actually starting to see um, impacts from people having technology
Mm,
close to them.
right.
In fact, correlated to that is there was a research in San Diego. I don't know, about 7, 8 years ago. A doctor gave everyone a meter that were pregnant, and he monitored them in the first trimester. And what he found was you were 3 times more likely to have a miscarriage in heavily exposed RF space.
Hmm.
And so there was an implication where there was an external stressor having a real impact to the women in the environment they lived in.
Right. Yep. So in Ayurveda, in our clinic, one of the biggest things we work with is preconception and fertility. And
Yeah.
definitely, if you are going to have RF signals in your reproductive organs, even though you may get pregnant and you may have the baby, it can happen with complications, and that's due to the low cellular prana, so structure, and perhaps mutations,
Hmm.
as you said as well.
Yeah.
So, but on the lap, you make a laptop case, which we have, and I love it. It's like a kind of hard magazine laptop case, which you can take out and use it on your lap. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate sometimes people will come to our house and like work with us, and they've got the laptop on lap, and I give them the shield. So when you have the shield under the laptop, so the shield's between your lap and the laptop. Okay, you have it from going down, but wouldn't it also be coming from the screen and to the keyboard to you
So,
in
so
front
what
of
you're
you?
referring to is what is an RF signal that's being generated by all of these technologies around us? It's an omnidirectional signal.
Right.
It goes everywhere. It starts tiny, tiny, and it expands all the way around like a big ball, keeps on going out, and can go up to several miles. And so, how do you try to protect the human body from something like that? So, what you do is you go after the most likely critical location of the human body you want to try to protect. And that's where there's direct contact.
Hmm.
And we haven't talked about this, but distance, as you move away a little bit from the distance of a little bit makes a big deal difference to the exposure. And so we try to deal with that, deal with the closest
Right.
exposure, and then protect that. And with the rest, with some where you can't modify the signal, deal with that as a danger, but you can't fix it because if you fixed it, you couldn't call your friends, you couldn't use your Wi-Fi, it wouldn't
Mm,
work.
right.
So we go after the most important
No,
parts
that's
we can.
good. Learning to feel your own pulse is one of the most powerful skills you can develop in a high signal world. The radial pulse on your wrist reflects your inner state, your nervous system, your emotional tone, your vitality. It shifts with stress, sleep, lifestyle, season, environmental load, and so many other stimuli. Pulse diagnosis in Ayurveda is the king of diagnostic methods. It is the greatest examination method to gain a great deep insight into the human physiology. Over the years, I've felt clear observations and differences in the pulses of patients undergoing radiation therapy, for example, as well as in people who experience periods of heavy electromagnetic exposure. I remember touring Australia with my teacher from India, and we were feeling the pulse of hundreds of patients. And sometimes he would ask the patient whether they lived near a hospital or a police station, or because these had very heavy transmission energies from these stations with the radios they use. So the pulse would show this, and they would be like, "Yeah, the hospital is across the road from me." So self pulse is not only about diagnosing; it's actually primarily about getting to know yourself on a deeper level. When awareness increases of yourself, regulation follows. This awareness, this self-balancing effect happens. The body settles. Stress is released through just feeling your pulse. It creates a space for your internal terrain to become more stable and balanced, even in a high signal world. So I love to bring this self pulse practice into this topic of non native electromagnetic frequencies because it is such a simple, free tool which you can use just to feel your pulse. And we've created an Ayurveda introductory self pulse course with my teachers, Dr. J.R. Raju, as well as Vaidya Harsha Raju, who are regarded as many by the world's foremost masters of pulse diagnosis. And you'll find a link to those pulse videos, which simply teaches you. It's very, very easy, and that's in the show notes. And I hope you enjoy to feel your pulse and tap into a much more pure and high vibration electromagnetic field within yourself. Now, when we get into the kind of action steps to take, we know it's dangerous to protect yourself. As Daniel just said, distance is key. Like, this is a fundamental law of physics. The greater the distance, the lower power density and biological
Right.
harm. And that is so important. I think what I'm now starting to do, like just literally yesterday, now that I'm researching your work more, we also have a baby blanket, an EMF baby blanket, which, by the way,
Ooh.
I measured. I have a device, and I measured a bunch of shielding ways, and that was by far the best from what I measured. And I don't know how good my device is, but that shielded the best, better than, I tried with the laptop case trying to block it, or I had another shield which I tried to block it, but the blanket was very effective. So I'm going to
Yeah.
start wearing, like, just having that on my lap, and also for my
Yeah.
wife having it on their lap just while we're
Yeah.
working, because it's very, especially for the reproductive system.
Yeah. As a side note, we actually have shielding that shields up to 2.2 gigahertz.
Wow.
Excuse me. 2.2 gigahertz. And we couldn't find laboratories to test our stuff. We had to go to the Air Force in the US that
Right.
had testing equipment because it's so high. But we
Mm-hmm.
try to create
Mm-hmm.
the highest quality shielding you can possibly have
Mm.
to have it most protective.
Right.
And that's part of what we started right from the very beginning. We're not going to create stuff that sort of does what we want it
Mm.
to do. We're going to try to be the best at it.
So we've also got your phone case,
Yep.
DefenderShield phone case. So that is that blocking the radiation from the front of the phone and the back of the phone as well?
No, not the back, just the front. The,
Okay. The screen
where
side.
is on the you close
Aha, right.
you close it, you open it up, you're working, you
Okay.
close it, and you put it on. This is where the
Okay.
shielding is.
Right.
Why? Because you can't go to a tower if you shielded the back.
Right.
So you're protecting that. And by
Okay.
the way, because it's omnidirectional, when you're really close to a transmission, when you're really close, almost the imaginary wall that occurs at
Mhm.
that, and it
Right.
will ultimately go around, but
Mhm.
typically away from the body when it
Mm.
does.
So if you're having the phone in the pocket with your case, it's better to have the screen
Oh yeah,
side touching your body. That's
right,
important.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly,
I'm gonna tell.
exactly.
That's okay. Another, like, okay. Honestly, I'm very much into EMF and devices, but I don't. I think the best device I've ever experienced is air tubes. And um, did you create? Were you the innovator of air tubes? Because now
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
many companies make it, but you innovated that.
I did because um, you can. The best is nothing, and
Right. Right. Of course.
and there was technology that reduced the levels, and that was good. But I knew from experience, even the lowest of levels can really be influential in the body that's using the device. So we actually took me over a year to create that product because what we had to do is find the technologies that we could embed into the various parts. Like, for example, we actually shielded the wiring that goes up, we
Wow.
actually shield it and we ground it. So we're minimizing that exposure. And then there's a conversion from electrical to acoustical that's in aluminum, which shields it. And then we have it only an acoustical link between the transmitter, the speaker, and the earpiece. So you're safe, completely safe.
Just to explain to those listening, and you can see on the video, so the speaker is actually probably, well, it's like maybe 10 to 15 centimeters away from my ear. And then between the speaker and my ear is literally just a plastic tube of air, and it's traveling through that tube into my ear with great stereosonic sound. So it's not only I'm not having a wire in my brain, like an antenna in my ear or brain, but I'm just hearing it from, maybe 10, 15 centimeters away from me. And I didn't know how that's all shielded as well. That's
It's
incredible.
all shielded.
And also, like, yeah, I just want to like congratulate you because you also keep refining the product. I just spoke to your team recently and I mentioned how, there was this thing where it would snap off after like a year or two, the earpiece there was some plastic thing, and you've rectified that, it is obviously we're not going to stop listening to phone calls and listening to podcasts. This is one of my most useful things, these air tubes, and I'm so grateful.
Well,
So
thank you.
it's,
Yeah,
it
and
feels so
they're
safe.
high fidelity, right? It was like I don't want something that diminishes the tone.
No.
So the chambers were actually specifically designed chambers to create the acoustics that you were looking for, to create the highest fidelity we could.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's
Of
great
course, no one
sound.
looks at that, but what they can hear it when you talk. So
It's great sound. So just again, we've spoken about it in the podcast, but distance is key. Instead of putting your laptop on your phone in your pocket, just put it on the table next to you, or even better,
right,
leave it
exactly,
further away. Same with the laptop. Like instead of having it on your lap, put it away from you. And even better,
right,
get like what I've got, a keyboard that's wide and a mouse that's wide. Like it's that I love. So I don't have to have my wrist and my pulse on the laptop. It's actually
right,
distance. That's huge. Like I can feel the pulse, the fields going into my pulse when I do have my hands on the laptop, which I do when I travel. I don't take my keyboard and mouse with me typically.
right.
But and another thing which I would love to get your opinion on, my best friend is airplane mode. I mean, my phone is probably on airplane mode 90 to 95% of the time. I only turn it on when I need to use it, and I prefer not to be contactable. I mean, what a liberation to not have to be on call. How effective is that? And just to add, while also on airplane mode, my Wi-Fi is off and my Bluetooth is off because those can still be on but not connected to a source if you're on airplane mode. So everything is
Dylan,
off.
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Right.
There were actually 4 transmitters coming out of a cell phone:
Right.
Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, and the cellular connection.
Right.
You don't need any of them other than the phone to work. And so I don't keep any of those other components on. And when you turn off and are in Wi-Fi in airplane, you're not turning off the transient signal of the GPS.
Right.
It's not a constant load, but it's transient. It does transmit. And
What
that's
is
why
that?
I
What is
say
that load? Like how
it's same
significant is
load
it?
as the 1.6 watts, but it's a
Okay.
shot information. I
Right.
shoot it out and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't transmit anymore. Then
Interesting.
a little while later, it shoots it out and then doesn't go anywhere. So we'll jump to the sanctuary, the bed sanctuary. You can put it on airplane mode. You still are being exposed to an RF signal when you have it close to your body. In fact, I was at a podcast and I told the podcaster, you don't want a cell phone on your nightstand. And she was being very nice, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much for letting me know that." And I said, "The reason why you don't is because your waves in your brain can be influenced by an RF signal, and you definitely don't want to risk that uh, uh, just so you can answer the phone, because it can be disruptive. In fact, electrohypersensitive severe people can be walking, and the brain waves are a sleeping brainwave pattern, and vice versa.
Mm.
And so you really don't want to trust. So she called back a couple of weeks later, and she said, "Dan, my husband and I are sleeping through the night, and we haven't done it for years. We both took it out of our the nightstand." And for them, that was true. It may not be for others, but you don't want to risk that influence into that environment. So,
Mm.
and associated with that, I talk about bees in the room. One bee won't kill you, 1,000 will. The more devices you have in your space, the more it's likely you'll feel the impacts of those technologies. You don't want anything producing that influence in your sleeping pattern. Why? Because of mitochondrial recovery. There's a lot of reasons why you don't really want to do that. And so it is really important to become resilient by eating right, by sleeping right, by exercising right. All those things are resilient patterns that allow you to deal with an aura exposure. And
Yeah.
you really have to work at it.
Yeah. Also, it's important to not be fearful of this or to be
Yes.
anxious because, as you said, resilience, like it's
Yeah.
inevitable. And there's some very simple things like use the speakerphone or use air tubes or just you can do so many. Use turn the Wi-Fi route off at night. You're asleep anyway. You don't need it. There's
No,
so
put
much
it
you
on a
can do.
timer. Put it
Yeah,
on a
that's easy.
timer.
Exactly.
Yeah, $10 timer, and it's away. In fact, the way I describe it is you don't need any of my products if you understand your environment. You can
Right.
take actions to reduce those exposures, and you'll have no challenges of
Yeah.
any impact related to an RF signal.
And
But you need to be aware.
that's the empowering thing because if you are aware and you implement these simple distance protocols and it becomes your lifestyle, it's not hard, then I'm happy to go through an airport scanner. Like I'm
Yeah,
happy to use Wi-Fi occasionally. I used to have my house
yeah,
Ethernet, you know, but now I'm all right. Like I have resilience and I also do other
yeah,
things for my health. So it's not hard. It's just very simple.
right.
And also, one more thing, like avoid Bluetooth wearables, right? Like
Oh,
AirPods.
God.
Oh,
Well,
sorry,
that's
AirPods. Yeah.
I don't know if I finished the discussion about that. It's 15 times more less power level when you use the Bluetooth than your earbuds,
Mhm.
and it's 0.1 watts can influence a DNA cell, the mutated cell, and so you don't want, in my opinion, to be using Bluetooth there or for any device you want to use to monitor your body, even for that matter. If there's a constant load, an RF signal, 2.3 gigahertz from a Wi Fi or a Bluetooth, if you can avoid that, it's just removing the potential
Right.
stressor of the human body.
Did you say Bluetooth is 15 times less power density?
Yeah.
Okay. But what I think, so then why is it everyone says it's so much worse than, for example, wired headphones? Is it, I see it as the pulsing, like to have a intense
Oh,
and then the pulsating
actually,
magnetic fields.
Dylan, that's one of the sort of important parts about the digital technology today. It's not, you had an analog signal 20 years ago, same amplitude, same frequency rate,
Constant.
and there were far less challenges to the human body as a result. Why? Because you'd put information in the digital world on and off, on and off, on and off. It's a pulsing signal. And that's that pulsing difference from an analog signal that is actually making the difference for potential body impacts. It's a pulsing signal. When it was an analog, it was always a constant load.
Right.
Your body could handle that constant load.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, I use an example. I can take a pole and put an elephant on top of that pole, and there can be concrete, and it won't break because it's. But I can take a digital pulse signal with the same thing, and the elephant jumping up and down, it quickly breaks.
Hmm.
So it's a different signal than we've seen in the past.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
that's really one of the real reasons we see the potential dangers of it today.
In Ayurveda, in this traditional medicine which I work in, we call it Vata, which is like the energy of movement or like radical movement, irregular movement. So creating kind of shocking
Right,
irregularities in the body
right.
and disrupting at a very subtle level also. So the ability to really go into those subtle channels of the biology and cause disruption. It can
Yeah,
penetrate those areas.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Very much appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your expertise. I could have spoken to you for another hour at least. There's
Yeah,
so
we
much.
didn't even talk about 5G.
Yeah, I mean, we also didn't talk about the new USA regulations.
Oh, yeah. Now that's potentially in flux, potentially. So
Who
who
knows? I
knows? We'll
mean, we
see.
can see, but still, it all comes down to the people and what you're gonna. I say
Right,
politics is just a summary of the collective.
right.
It's what the people feel, and yeah, I hope you can take these simple actions if you want to check out uh, DefenderShield's products, which I think are the best shielding products you can get. You can check out DefenderShield.com, and we have a discount code Vital Veda, which you can get discount on. And one more thing, like another big important product is pregnancy belly
Right,
bands. This is something
right.
we give to all our patients, and that's just putting literally like a sock for your pregnant belly, and that's absolutely crucial because of all the rich water content and amniotic fluid in pregnancy that's going to absorb. I've heard like 10 to 20 times more frequency than other parts of the body, like. Or if you're not pregnant, like it's getting so much more radiation because
Yeah,
of the concentration of the fluids.
yeah. I mean, I was really pretty concerned about it the more I learned um, of the dangers. And I knew it was a simple fix
Right.
for us. We could really reduce those potential dangers by simply creating a lining in a piece of cloth.
Wow. Yeah.
Simple. But I'd like to end a little bit with a statement, and it's like we're the architect of our own destiny. We really need to take control of what we think is important, and so learning about this and choosing a path with this is a good thing to do. And you can decide what level of concern you should have or fear. I don't think it's fear at all. I just simply think it's understanding the environment we're in. And as you know, in 100 years, an RF signal will be differently dressed in the human body. It will get used to it.
Right.
And so, but right now, it's not used to it.
Hmm. But maybe babies growing up with it are getting more accustomed to it,
Yeah,
and it may not affect them as much
right.
because, yeah,
Yeah, and that's historically true, right? The
right,
human body gets used to the
right,
environment
yeah,
as time goes on.
yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. Appreciate the work you're doing so much, and maybe
Well,
we'll chat
thank you.
again about other topics on EMF
Oh
because
yeah,
you're a
well, I
wealth of
love chatting
knowledge.
with you.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank
Um, because you seem as passionate as I am.
you. Yes. Thank you so much for listening. I genuinely am grateful for you joining this episode and sticking till the end because this is such important information. If you enjoyed this episode, I want to share with you other episodes that are on similar topics that I'm sure you will love. First of all is episode number 19 of the Vital Veda podcast. It's called EMF, 5G, and Building Biology. That's with Nicole Bilsma, who's one of the leading building biologists in the world, certainly in Australia. And that is more on the building. How can we optimize our building? Whether Daniel is more about shielding from devices, of course, building also, but Nicole Bilsma is a building biologist and has universities and schools of building biology. The second is an interesting topic on EMF. It's called EMF Expanded, Geoelectric and Human Generated Radiation with Gerard Binney. So that's number 85 of the Vital Veda podcast. And that is about geoelectric and human generated radiation. So more subtle, a bit more esoteric, but more on our internal electromagnetic fields, kind of like what the pulse taps into. If you're interested in what I was speaking about with Daniel about light, well, you got to listen to number 21 of the Vital Veda podcast, The Light Diet, Quantum Health, and Circadian Rhythms with Matt Maruka. And lastly, the mind and the consciousness supersedes all this biological and physical implications. So you've got to listen to episode number 151 with Dr. A.V. Raju on how fear shapes disease, because that is ultimately king of how your inner biology and fear influence disease. And ultimately, we've got to transcend this EMF. So thank you so much for listening. Remember to check out the show notes. Remember to join DefenderShield. I mean, it's such good products. You can get 10% discount with the code Vital Veda. Check out the show notes for the Abhyanga guide. Get yourself air tubes. I cannot recommend them enough. If you know anyone pregnant, the best gift you can give them is a belly band. Just start shielding more and let us know what you think of this episode. Please share it with a friend. People got to listen to this. People who are putting phone next to their head, using Bluetooth wearables, having the Wi-Fi on at night when they don't need it anyway, they're asleep. Send this episode, share it on Instagram, tag Vital Veda, tag DefenderShield. And until next time, much love.